You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com. Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your game tickets from the longtime trusted source in Wisconsin, Ticket King. Visit their locations in Milwaukee and Green Bay, or just go to their website, theticketking.com. Again, that's theticketking.com.
Hello? It's just the physical emotion of discomfort for the guy. This is human drama now. Welcome back to the NFL Draft. And with the first round pick, Atlanta has selected Brett Favre. Brett Favre. Brett Favre. Brett Favre. So Atlanta gets a favor by selecting Brett Favre. Welcome back to the draft. Good young players with the draft all about year in and year out. Welcome back to the draft. Wide receiver, running back, tackle, offensive line, wide receiver, running back, tackle, quarterback. Oh, I'll get into that. Tony Mandarich. Welcome back to the NFL Draft. And with the first round pick, Aaron Rodgers. Welcome back to the NFL Draft.
So I think that's the logical explanation.
Let's just, say that didn't happen.
It was a return to greatness. It was a return to form.
It's crazy. He just kind of flew under the radar.
Get this out there so I sound good on Cheesehead Radio.
You're listening to the best Packer radio show on the internet.
Cheesehead Radio.
1, 2, 3, come on.
Well, you don't know what we can find. Why don't you come with me, little girl, on a magic walking ride? Well, you don't know what we can find. Why don't you come with me, little girl?
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a off-season draft edition of Cheesehead Radio. We are back, like it or not. Your hosts tonight are the provocative C. D'Angeli of PackersTalk.com and Cheesehead TV, the erudite Michelle Bruton of Cheesehead TV and Bleacher Report, the compassionate Jayme Snowden of Cheesehead TV, and me, Jersey Al of Packers Talk and Cheesehead TV. Sponsoring the Packers Talk Network still are the fine folks at Ticket King. They've been selling Packers, Badgers, and other tickets in Wisconsin for 25 years, have a reputation for excellent customer service and prices. Be sure to check out their website, theticketking.com. Okay, that's it for the intros. Let's get started with some Packers news.
Packers news.
Thankfully, it being the off-season, we don't have any injury report updates to open the news segment this week. We open with good news. The first day of the Packers off-season program began Monday, which includes voluntary workouts. The phase is limited only to strength, conditioning, and rehab.
And the Packers feel strongly about having close to 100% participation in these workouts as possible. And as ESPN's Rob Domofsky reported, the team will pay close to $5 million this year in workout bonuses to add extra incentives. 20 players are eligible for those bonuses.
As for the headlines from first days of Phase 1, we learned that Aaron Rodgers, at 33 years old, feels like he's in the best shape he's been in starting an off-season program. His goal was to return to work under 220 pounds, and he did it. How did he do it? In part by cutting back on golf.
That makes total sense. Anyway, cutting back on golf. Anyway, another buzzy topic during these early workouts is the competition at TJ Lang's vacated right guard spot. Now, there's been some hand-wringing in the media about this position, but the players seem to think it'll all be just fine. The competition appears to be between three players: veteran Don Barclay, 2016 sixth-round pick Kyle Murphy, and practice squad holdover Lucas Patrick. What in the world would there be to get upset about?
Everything's fine.
Well, the Packers did make a big splash in free agency when they signed not one, but two tight ends in Martellus Bennett and Lance Kendricks, who joined veteran Richard Rodgers at the position. Aaron Rodgers said that he expects the offense to run more two tight end sets this year as a result, which should be fun to watch.
I would imagine. Now, given that Ty Montgomery will be working in the backfield from day one this year, and knowing what fullback Aaron Rukowski can do, Rodgers also said he already envisions this personnel group being more run/pass balanced than in years past.
Speaking of pass catchers, Jordy Nelson is excited to be able to participate from the outset after missing the entire offseason program last year coming off his ACL injury. Nelson said he'll be able to do everything in individual position workouts as well as OTAs.
Another important player is recovering well. Clay Matthews, who struggled with his shoulder injury in 2016, is finally healthy again. As a result, he expects to be used all over the field, both as a rusher off the edge as well as an inside linebacker, at least until he gets injured again.
And that uplifting final thought was your Packers news of the week.
Joy to the world.
I'm sorry. Am I editorializing during the news again? I apologize. That was fake news. It was fake news, guys. Sorry about that.
Very
You will not get injured again. Yeah, I know. Sorry. But no one was surprised by it. There's the problem. Well, hey, the gang is back. How we doing, guys?
Not so good, evidently.
Oh, come on. A little technical difficulty to start the show. This is always expected when we haven't done this for a couple of months, but it is good to be back in the saddle. And there's stuff to talk about. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. This has been an actual eventful off-season for the Green Bay Packers, and we have the draft coming up very, very quickly. So a lot of excitement. Any initial thoughts from each of you on how this off-season has gone? Anything surprising, or are you excited about or disappointed about?
Well, isn't eventful Packers off-season an oxymoron? I thought it was.
Yeah, it's certainly not something we've heard very often.
But it has been. There's actually been signings. Normally it's a graveyard coming out of 1265 for 3 months, and then we finally get to the draft. But we've actually had stuff.
Yeah, I think it was all our needling over the years. Finally caught up. Ted finally was.
Well, Ted finally.
Fine. You guys want a free agent? Here, have 2 tight ends.
Fine. Here.
Essentially on the same day. Here you go. Just take 2 of them.
This is what you're getting. This is your day.
Now shut up and go back.
This will last you the next 5 years.
It did feel like the most Ted Thompson move of all time to basically not only sign 2 of the players of the same position, but to basically be like, hey, our defense is what got us knocked out of the playoffs. Here's 2 tight ends. And I'm not complaining. Martellus Bennett is an incredible player. I'm very excited to see him in green and gold. But
if you can't fix the defense, score more points.
Yeah.
That's the mantra, I think, for 2017. We're going to score 50. And to heck with the defense.
Can we get that put on the Packers fence? Instead of Hale Rogers, it'll be
50 or bust or something.
We'll just score 50.
And what's the saying in basketball? Offense never quits. Oh, wait, no, that's defense. Never mind. No. So, interestingly enough, Aaron Rodgers had an interview yesterday, and he was kind of asked about the all-in statement that he had made at the end of the season that he was kind of looking for. There was a little bit of a feeling from people that heard the quote from Aaron Rodgers that it was a little bit of a shot across the bow towards Ted Thompson, like, we have faith in the talent that we have, and we're all in for next year. When he was kind of asked, are you all in? He says, well, it's kind of the first day. We'll see how it goes. Yes, a very good politically correct statement, but any concerns at positional groups going into the season? We're going to go through all that position by position in just a moment, but just off the top of your head, concerns that you have going in?
Cornerback. I mean, that's just position-wise the one I'm scared of the most, but I think just looking at the roster as a whole, I think there's some positions where we have a lot of youth and a lot of people who are about at the kind of same levels, and I think, if you think back to how we got in the cornerback situation last year, we had one really solid veteran, and then you had some younger guys who you assumed were going to step up and you hoped could be led by that veteran, and you thought the unit could be okay. And that didn't happen when Sam Shields got hurt. And I worry that some other positions, especially along the defense, could happen to again this year, because there's so many spots to fill with a veteran leadership that obviously we're not going to go out and sign a bunch more veterans. That I worry that we're going to have a couple of situations next season like we had with the cornerback situation last season.
Michelle.
Yeah, I think I pretty much just need to echo and, add on to what Jayme said. I think that when sure, the Packers lost some impact players at different positions. I think a lot of people don't agree with me on this. And I wrote a couple articles about him last season for Cheesehead TV and got some hate. But I think Micah Hyde was one of the more talented and versatile defensive players. And now that he's gone, I think the secondary as a whole is kind of going to struggle to make up his production on the field because you can't, making up his production could take the efforts of 2 or 3 players rather than just one now. And I think that with corner, you've got Devon House, and he can push Rollins and Randall for a starting spot. But I think the problem for the Packers is that, at this stage in the game, Rollins and Randall have to be kind of done with their development. They have to be ready to go. They have to be starting caliber. And I just don't think they're there yet. And so not only do you not have, that kind of reliable production out of your alleged starters, but then you really don't have a lot of depth behind them either. So if anyone gets injured, the whole thing comes tumbling down again.
Jersey Al.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest concern for me that the Packers have is what are they going to do about that 4th-string tight end? Who is going to step up and become that guy that they need to sit on that bench? Silence. All right. Did that go over everybody's head, or you're shocked, or?
No, I thought you were being totally serious, Al.
4th-string tight end. Okay. No, I was not
chuckled,
being
but I was muted.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to take it to... What? Okay, no patronizing laughs now, all right? Too late. You had your chance.
I was looking at Jayme. That's okay. I wasn't laughing at you. It's okay.
No, anyway, in all seriousness, I'll take a different approach than Jayme and Michelle, and it just happens to actually fall in with what I really believe is my biggest concern is the pass rush. I need players that are going to go after the opposing quarterbacks and make the jobs of those cornerbacks a heck of a lot easier and not make them have to track receivers all over the field. So what I want to see in the first round or second round, somewhere in those first 2 rounds, I want a guy who's going to come in and have an impact on the Packers' pass rush.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, let's start going through position by position. Let's see what the Packers have done in free agency and where those needs are. And I don't know how versed you guys are deeply into some of the positions, but maybe at each position where the needs are, and maybe if we have a couple names that there would be some interest in. But let's start at quarterback.
Okay, let's start at quarterback. What is there to say?
Aaron Rodgers is still good.
Aaron Rodgers is our starter.
He's
right?
our starter. Yes,
okay.
We got number 1.
All right, good. Brett Hundley, number 2. Still not.
Brett Hundley's kind of funny because he's getting a lot of airtime around here. I don't know how much it is outside of Wisconsin, but he's starting to get some commercials.
Oh, really?
Like he's
really?
Yeah, like a Cellcom commercial or something like that. He did a Cellcom commercial with Mike McCarthy here locally, and so you're kind of looking at it, okay, well, is he a big enough name now that he's actually become a star player for the Packers? And I don't know if I have a lot of faith in that yet. I know that they're very high on him and his ability. I don't know if he's really developed to be the guy that if Aaron Rodgers were to go down for an extended period of time, if he'd be any better than Matt Flynn or anyone else that we've had trying to fill in. Joe Callahan also on the roster. What's your guys' feelings right now on Brett Hundley?
To be honest, I think the most interesting thing about Brett Hundley, I mean, if we have the luxury of just saying, let's assume Rodgers doesn't get injured this year, knock on wood. I think the most interesting about Hundley is, does he play out the rest of his contract through the 2018 season, or does he get traded? And like you, similar to what you said, I don't know that he's done enough to prove that he would be a valuable trade commodity. On the other hand, you look at some of the guys who are going to be starting this year, presumably, and you realize that I think this league, there are so many guys who have just been hanging around for years, and I think people are always interested in kind of young guns that they can develop into their own schemes. And, I think that there could be a sizable interest in him over, before the trade deadline comes, depending on what the Packers were looking to get for him.
Agreed. I think that's where really has the most value is what he might potentially bring. That was an old Ron Wolf tactic. They always drafted quarterbacks and kept them for a couple of years and then got something back for them from teams that were desperate for quarterbacks, and I'd say in today's NFL, that's even more the case. You've got more teams that are desperate for quarterbacks. So I'd be shocked if Brett Hundley wasn't traded sometime next year.
Jayme?
I am still just sitting here, mouth open, that Brett Hundley has a commercial. Like, that is just, that must just be an only Green Bay thing, because there is no way that the backup quarterback for the Bengals here has a commercial. I don't even think they let what's gingerhead quarterback here have his own commercials. So, like, that's just blowing my mind right now. It's hard to get past that. But I think I would definitely agree that when you look at everyone who is starting right now in the NFL, I think it was the San Francisco 49ers quarterback who got arrested. And I got that alert on my phone, and I was like, I had no idea who this kid's name is. I didn't know he was their quarterback. So when I think of the reaches that people are making and trying to really scramble to identify their new person, their up-and-coming person, getting someone who's gone through Mike McCarthy's quarterback school, who's been schooled under Aaron Rodgers, that's something teams are going to go for, and Brett Hundley's shown himself well in preseason. But even with Aaron Rodgers, there's no way we, go into camp with only 3, because I think Joe Callahan bounced around a spot last season, but they're always looking to develop that guy, and I know that they don't think Brett Hundley is going to be like the Doug Peterson to just sit around and be behind Aaron Rodgers. So I wouldn't be surprised if Brett Hundley leaves, but I also wouldn't be surprised if somehow a new arm comes into camp and beats out Joe Callahan or creates some sort of interesting backup QB controversy.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Brett.
I guess my question would be, do you think that we're reaching the point where we're looking for the heir apparent yet for Aaron Rodgers? I mean, at one point we had to draft Aaron Rodgers to sit on the bench for 3 years and eventually step in for Brett Favre. After years of saying, who's going to be the heir apparent? Who's going to be the heir apparent? We got to get somebody. Who's going to be the next guy? Finally got Aaron Rodgers in 2005. Have we reached that point where maybe, since we've got some pretty decent quarterbacks at the top of the draft this year, that might fall? There's a couple guys in that first, second round. Is it crazy enough to think that Ted Thompson might do that, or no chance that we might look at a guy 5th, 6th round just to come in and give some competition for Hundley and Callahan?
I don't think we're there yet. I also think we have too many other holes that I can't see Ted Thompson making that move now. Maybe a year or 2 more, but someone really amazing would have to fall, and and not yet.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that, teams don't or can't really do what Thompson did with Aaron Rodgers anymore. And that was sort of one of the last times we've seen someone get taken that high and then for that long. And I think, this is an argument I get into with my husband every year when we watch the draft, because I'm like, these guys could be so great if they were just given a year or 2 years to develop, but people are so desperate to start them now. Obviously, that's the case if you have someone like Aaron Rodgers under center already, but I think then the problem you run into is it's kind of just a bad look to be drafting someone high enough where it's clear that they're your quarterback of the future when you haven't done enough to prepare your current team to win another title.
Yeah, just as you guys were talking, I'm just thinking about Brett Hundley and trades and whatnot, and it just occurred to me there's one team that would make tremendous sense for him to be, for someone to go after him, and that would be the New York Giants. They are at the position right now that you're talking about, looking at, okay, who's going to be the replacement for Eli Manning. They're there right now. As you mentioned, we're not. They're there right now. You've got Ben McAdoo, ex-Packers coach there, similar systems. Hundley makes so much sense for them to go after him, bring him in, and he's ready to roll because he's running a similar system. But next year, not this year.
All right. So collectively, quarterback pretty much off the radar for this year, other than the possibility of trading Hundley and bringing someone in late round or free agent. Would you guys agree?
I think so.
All right. Well, let's move on to a far more entertaining subject.
Running back.
Eddie Lacy is gone. No more Eddie Lacy. He is now an officially a Seattle Seahawk. this wasn't necessarily the deepest position for the Packers last year anyway, having to move a wide receiver, Ty Montgomery, to the running back position, signing Christian Michael partway through the season. We do have a very solid fullback in Aaron Rukowski, but obviously when you look at all the mock drafts, running back keeps coming up for that pick at number 29. What's your thoughts right now on the running back situation for the Packers?
I'd say it's close to a guarantee you're going to see a running back drafted. Earliest I could see would be round 2. Latest I could probably see is round 4. Somewhere in that range, Packers are going to pick up a pretty good running back. There's a lot of good running backs in this draft.
I agree. If they took a running back with pick 1, I think I'd be mad. I mean,
I would.
It is not a first round need. We have first round needs. I am not a fan of drafting running backs in the first round anyway. And we need another body in there who has got skill and talent, who's a quality player, not like, we can't just go through the draft, not get a running back, and then bring someone in undrafted, not that they're not quality, but I think we need someone else in there who's got some experience at a decent college program to really just beef up that competition. And just because while Ty Montgomery showed so much last year, it's you don't really know what we're going to get this year. So I think we need another good body in there, but if they drafted pick 29, I would be throwing things. That would just be ridiculous to me.
So I feel like not only is the idea of a running back period at 29 so ridiculous, but I saw a mock draft this week, and I'm not going to say who it was by because I don't want to take this opportunity to bash fellow media members, but someone on NFL.com did a mock draft where not only did they mock a running back to the Packers at 29, but it was Joe Mixon, which...
Oh, Lordy.
I know of who you speak.
Yeah, I saw that too.
It's just
that's just to get attention. If you ask me, that's just to get attention. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, yeah, and totally. And it's, even if people don't study Ted Thompson's draft tendencies as closely as we do, if they're Nationals versus Packers, I still feel like anyone who writes about football professionally knows Thompson well enough to know that he hasn't come out and said that he's off the board, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's off the board altogether. And so in the first round, I could not believe it. At first, I had to make sure the R wasn't really a C, because every other position or every other mock has been cornerback, basically. But I was pretty scandalized, to say the least.
To imagine a player with character issues that are currently another allegation that people are looking at, and a running back. Like, two things we're not doing in round 1.
My fear right now a little bit is we're going to assume that Ty Montgomery might change his number. Maybe he won't have 88 anymore. He's going to move full-time to running back. I'm hoping he's going to add a little muscle, because just what I feel right now is that between Ty Montgomery and Christian Michael is you have two guys who are kind of speedy scat backs who tend to try to run around people. And with Lacey gone, you don't have that guy who really lowers his shoulders and tries to go through people. Obviously, Ty Montgomery is great. I mean, stiff arm, does everything you want to do. Very dynamic in the backfield. I'm still a big Christian Michael fan. I think if the guy could actually learn the playbook and get behind Aaron Rukowski, I think that actually could be a pretty interesting combination. Do you guys have faith in Ty Montgomery to last an entire season if he is given the feature running back role?
I've always been on the Ty Montgomery train. When you look at him and you look at his arm, there's just something about his physique, and you're just like, that is beast mode. Whatever play you are running, I am trusting you are going to do it well. And then, the beginning of the season with the kick that he, the kickoff that he stepped out of bounds and caught so that the kick would be out of bounds. He was just making so many heads-up, smart plays that you just don't typically see of younger players, that my confidence in him was so high. And then to see him take the challenge of new position and stepping into a role where the Packers needed him was so amazing to watch, that right now it almost feels that he did so well last year, it's too good to be true / I don't know if you can go up from there in my expectation level. And so I think in that transition to full-time running back, our opponents understand it more. There's more on him to learn and digest. I'm not expecting a step back, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. And so it's really hard for me to say, yes, you are number one, you are amazing, this is going to go off without a hitch completely, transition will be smooth, and everything will be fine. And that's why I have to sit there and pause on it. I have a ton of faith in him that this is uncharted waters.
I have faith that he'll be fine for the entire season, for the main reason that they are not going to run the ball that much. They are going to be throwing the ball all over the field. He's not going to have as many carries as they would have given to an Eddie Lacy, let's say. And I do believe that when they draft a running back, they're going to draft a big back, as a complement to Montgomery and Michael. So I don't think you're going to have to worry about so many carries for Ty Montgomery that he wears down.
Michelle, any sanity here?
I don't think we've seen anything from him that suggests to me that he's not able to handle the workload. He was always built more like a running back than a wide receiver, so I don't think he's particularly fragile. And given his running style and the fact that he's going to be taking a lot of passes out of the backfield rather than just plowing through the middle of the line, I feel like he's not going to be in very big danger. Not like an Eddie Lacy type workload and toll on his body. Well, so assuming that they're not going to take one particularly early, I'm sort of looking in maybe round 3, round 4. And my favorite player in the mid-rounds of the draft is, unsurprisingly, Wisconsin's Corey Clement. I think that he, and not just because they both went to school, but I think he's really similar to Melvin Gordon in a lot of ways. And I think that his body type is one that can kind of complement the weapons that the Packers already have in the backfield without kind of replicating any of the skills that they already have present on the roster.
All right, I'd be more inclined to go with a little bit of a bigger running back, maybe a Donta Foreman out of Texas, James Conner out of Pitt, possibly Ryan Hill out of Wyoming, some of those guys who should all be in that round 3 to 4 range, somewhere around there. But I think for sure they're going to pick somebody there.
Wide receiver.
Core group of Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb. We got Adams. We've got Geronimo Allison has been resigned. We got McCaffrey. We had really no big losses or gains at this positional group, but occasionally still some concerns. Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams have had some inconsistencies. It's always kind of weird that Ted Thompson, for quite a number of years in a row, always seemed to draft wide receivers and relatively high, maybe not first round, but second, third round. Do you feel like this group is pretty much settled, or do you think there's a chance that he's just going to grab one of those wide receivers again at the top? And I'm just going to stop talking and let you guys go.
So I think that's the big issue for Randall Cobb is the role he had to take on when Jordy went down was just not complementary to his skill set. I think that Randall Cobb is a terrific player. I don't think he's a number one wideout. And that's not necessarily a dig on Randall Cobb. I just don't think he should be put in the position of having to be a number one wideout. So I think by virtue of Nelson being good to go and totally healthy, he was, I think, still really working his way back through, I would say, the first quarter, the first third of the year last year. So I think that we're going to see all the wideouts look a lot better as a result, just by virtue of Nelson being, back to 100%. But that being said, I do think Thompson, my big thing for the Packers is that they need to keep their strengths a strength. They've got enough weaknesses where they can't allow their positions of strength to become weaknesses. And so I think that he definitely looks to kind of make that group a little bit more dynamic this year. And 2 players I really like. One of them is Cooper Kupp out of Eastern Washington, who's a late second, early to mid-third round prospect. He's big. He's 6'2", 204 pounds. He's kind of one of the best receivers you might not have heard of type deal. And the other receiver I really like is Texas A&M's Josh Reynolds, who, in a lot of ways, looks on paper just like a Corey Davis or a Mike Williams, who are both first-round prospects this year. Josh Reynolds is a 5th or 6th-round prospect, mostly because he's a little bit, he's not super physical or aggressive, so I think a lot of people think he's going to get kind of stopped up on the perimeter and not be able to hold his own against cornerbacks. But he's actually, this season he was, I don't want to misstate the record, but I believe it's that he was the most productive receiver in SEC history, which is not a small feat if you look at some of the players that SEC has produced. He's a touchdown machine, crazy productive, just the total kind of person that, you know, if you get him lining up with Cobb and Nelson and Adams, you are almost guaranteed to get a touchdown because you just can't cover all of them. And Bennett, I should add, too.
All right. Jayme, what do you think? Any thoughts on wide receiver?
Well, I don't have nearly the in-depth of knowledge that Michelle has on the draft prospects, but I definitely think that the fact that Jordy will be another year removed from his injury will help the rest of the wide receivers. I also think that getting 2 solid tight ends in the picture will help, because so much of what, you know, we look back at what Cobb did last year and feel relatively unimpressed by it. It seemed a mediocre year, but so much of that was because he was covered a lot and didn't get the looks then. But with being able to add other weapons through the tight ends and really try to mix up the offense, I think that that'll help Cobb. I have faith in Adams. I don't think that that's going to be just a one-year fluke. And I was really excited that they re-signed Allison. Of course, there will be a 4th-round wide receiver, 3rd-round wide receiver that will happen. But I don't think that this is going to be a unit that sees a lot of change.
Jersey.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I'm actually really, really high on Davante Adams, which I haven't always been in the past, but I kind of went back and watched some of his tape when I had some time a few weeks ago. And, boy, he really, really improved his route running last year. I mean, he's got some darn good moves that are very difficult for cornerbacks to stay with. So, and I think that was a big reason for his bounce-back year that he had. So I just see that improving, see him improving more and more, and, you know, taking a bigger role, whereas where we might have thought Cobb would be the number 2, you know, behind Nelson. I think Adams is going to establish himself as the number 2 target for Rodgers behind Nelson. As far as the draft goes, you know, this could be one of those years where Thompson tries to pick somebody in round 6 and 7 that, you know, is a big receiver that is just a roll of the dice. You might hit on something, you might not. Or I could see him going for something in the 4th round or so. One name that I'll throw out that I like is a guy named Kenny Golladay from Northern Illinois, who's a big receiver. He actually has a lot of the same qualities as Jordy Nelson. He's tall, he's a long strider, he's got a very large catching radius, he'll catch the ball wherever it's thrown. Has a lot to work on, route running, you know, that's why he's going to be a 4th round or a 3rd round at best selection, but that's one name I wouldn't mind if Ted plucked off the draft list. But overall, all right. Yeah, I don't see the need for a lot of change, but, you know, with Ted, that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Exactly. So, kind of reviewing, we're not seeing a need at quarterback. We're probably not seeing a need at wide receiver, but we got a strong feeling Ted is probably going to pick someone late round at least, if not closer to mid-round. And running back, probably thinking very strongly that we're going to see one in the mid-rounds, if not the early rounds for running back. So that's done. Here's an easy one coming up.
Next.
A lot of stuff going on here. I mean, we lose Jared Cook, folk hero, master. I mean, he's going to have the Billie Jean catch forever and ever. Great, you know, obviously fantastic memory and a folk hero, gone. We sign 2 guys to come in and join Richard Rodgers. One, of course, is Martellus Bennett, who is, oddly enough, this really big, irreverent personality that doesn't seem to vibe a little bit with what we've traditionally looked at as being the Packer people locker room. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, but obviously he does bring some veteran talent and experience to the team. Then, of course, we have Lance Kendricks, the former Badger, who also is going to come in and possibly have some contributing roles there along with Rodgers. I'm sure you guys are thinking the same thing I am, that we're probably not looking at a draft pick here at the tight end position, but maybe I'm wrong. Take it around the horn and your thoughts at tight end and maybe how we see Bennett fitting into this picture.
Well, how Bennett's fitting in was my hot pocket, so I'm not going into that now, and maybe you should read ahead so you know that.
We had hot pockets?
We do.
I didn't know that.
But I think that there will be a 7th round undrafted free agent somewhere like way down there to, finally fulfill Jersey Al's wish of a 4th tight end on the bench. I don't think that person will stay on the team, but I think that just Richard Rodgers is what Richard Rodgers is. That's just, it's not, we know his feeling. He is at it. That is it. And if we had an injury to Bennett or Kendrick, I don't know if Richard Rodgers is enough to keep it. So I think just having someone there to camp to see another body in there, I think that that's a good idea. That's also, if this is picked at pick 29, there would be massive throwing things in my room.
So I've actually, strangely enough, interacted with Marty Bennett quite a bit. He's actually a really talented children's book author and artist. And so in my role as an editor at Triumph Books, a while back we were actually talking to him and his agent a lot about possibly publishing one of his children's books. So we had a lot of calls with them. And I think that what gets represented in the media is that he's this, kind of brash personality who, doesn't really care what people think about him and says whatever he wants and blah, 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 blah. But I think in reality, he's just like a really incredible, visionary, creative guy who isn't sort of a typical football player. I mean, it's kind of crazy that he makes a living playing football given all of his other talents and interests. And so I think that maybe that's why some of the guys in the locker room don't really know what to make of him or maybe don't mesh with him right off the bat. But I think the big thing for him is he is so dedicated and so talented that in the type of locker room that already has such solid established leadership that there's no way the introduction of such a big personality could throw it off. And certainly the Packers have that between Mike Daniels and Aaron Rodgers and, some of the other leaders they have on that team. So I think he's an amazing addition. I think he's the perfect tight end for this system. And I don't think his personality would be an issue at all.
Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much really to add to that, especially what Michelle just said. I think he's the perfect fit for this offense, and I think he's going to make Aaron Rodgers a very happy man. So I think we can just move on to the next position.
Well, let's do that then.
Offensive line.
A little more consternation here. Obviously, in the past year, we've lost 3 big players who've been big contributors. Obviously, Josh Sitton lost at the beginning of the season. T.J. Lang now also gone. Those 2 were kind of bookends around the center for years and years. J.C. Tretter now also gone. I think, did he go to the Bills, I believe?
Cleveland.
Really, Cleveland, yeah. So really, we have an interior line that's in flux. We're still thinking Bakhtiari Balaga at tackle. We're still thinking Lindsley at center. But obviously, are we thinking that this is going to be a first 3 rounds addressed position? And what do you guys think about the competition right now at guard?
Yeah, this is a interesting one. I mean, how many NFL general managers do you think have let 2 Pro Bowl level guards leave the team within the span of about 8 or 9 months? I don't think too many. And then a guy who could have been one of the replacements for them also leaves the team. So this is kind of a serious situation here. to the extent that the position is offensive guard, okay? It's not quarterback, it's not wide receiver, it's offensive guard, and I think it's pretty evident that Ted Thompson doesn't particularly value offensive guards that highly, or at least doesn't think they should be paid that highly anyway. But something definitely needs to be done here. I read something yesterday where they're looking at Barkley as the leading candidate to take over for Lang, and I'm like, what?
Sure are.
What? Did I read that correct? I really had to go back and read it again. So this is definitely a concern. I think, and I know this is out there, but I think that Ted Thompson is actually going to draft a real guard this time around. Not an offensive tackle who's going to need a year or two to learn how to play guard, but a guard in round 2 or round 3, a guy who has played offensive guard and could potentially step in and take over for Lang. Crazy talk, I know, but that's my weird prediction.
The taking over for Lang concept is a little bit, it's a little more, it's not like it's an heir apparent. He's got to take over now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely have, Ted Thompson's going to go in 1 year signing 2 free agents and drafting a guard. That's, wow.
I said it was out there.
I think that there is supposed to be a solar eclipse this year, so maybe. I think I would be more concerned about the offensive line if Ted Thompson didn't have the track record he does with offensive lines. Like if this was cornerback or interior defensive lineman, I would be a little bit more nervous. But Ted seems to be able to find the Bakhtiaris, the people either at, Bulaga with your first-round pick or someone in the 4th or 5th round that we're all like, who is that? And then all of a sudden, 3 games in, they're starting, and you're like, oh, I are a genius. I'm sorry. So it is a little worrisome to me that the people who protect our, most important asset on the team is very much in flux. I was less, seeing Lang go, I kind of thought that figured that would happen. When Shredder left, for some reason, that one, really hit me. And that was really close to the Bennett signing. I was like, yay, Bennett. But just the fact that that seems to be a place that Ted is really good at, I'm not super worried about. I don't know if he's actually going to draft a guard, but, it is a crazy year.
Well, the only thing about drafting a guard as opposed to a tackle he could kick inside, which is his usual preference, is that, Ted's kind of backed himself into a corner a little bit here, and it makes me a little bit nervous because you'd like to think that your general manager has a plan that stretches beyond the upcoming year, that he's thinking things out over the course of how will this affect the team over multiple years. So if he had been planning to let Lang and Sitton go, you'd think that maybe instead of drafting 2 players like Spriggs and Kyle Murphy, he would have taken someone who was a more natural conversion to guard. But the problem with that is that you don't take someone like Jason Spriggs and trade up to get him if you're going to move him inside to guard. He's a clear tackle to me. And Kyle Murphy, similarly, really projects best at tackle. I just don't really see him becoming a guard, especially because he's not that strong. So you've got, an abundance of tackles on the roster, but no one except Barkley, which is terrifying, who can really play guard. So I sort of agree with Jersey Al that I think he just kind of has to draft a true guard at this point. There's none of his players really naturally project there to me.
The top-ranked guard in the draft is, I think it's Forrest Gump from Western Kentucky. Is that correct?
Forrest Lamp.
Forrest Lamp, sorry. Yeah. Life is like a box of chocolates. Yeah. And he could easily project to pick number 29. But I don't see Thompson taking one in the first round. But I could see one in the first 3.
Can he run this Forrest Gump guy? I don't know what I'm doing to CD tonight, but he's really not digging my jokes, is he?
You just stun him into silence, Al.
It's like the second time.
You stun him.
I'm
you stun
struggling
him back
with the technology.
4 or 5 seconds.
I can't think clearly today because I'm just trying to connect all these wires and Ethernet cables. So it's just a crazy night. Anyway, it's hard to be the narrator when your technology's not working. Anyway, hey, let's move on to defensive line.
Defensive line.
All right. Well, the Connor Barwin dream scenario did not work out. Dayton Jones is now a Viking. The Packers did sign Ricky Jean-Francois from Washington, but the line does seem a little shorthanded right now. And I think Al alluded to this earlier in the show, that it was some concerns with the pass rush, and obviously, so we're looking at Mike Daniels, Francis, you got Ringo, you got Kenny Clark, most likely Goyon is probably Goyon at this point. Looking at a second suspension. Yeah, you got Lauer in there too. But, is this just one of those things where we don't pay attention because we don't have a lot of really big productive names on this line? Is this a workable unit that's doing what it needs to be able to do? Or is this something that you can see Thompson address? I mean, obviously, you've talked to most draft experts. They'll always tell you you always draft a defensive lineman in every draft, whether you need one or not, just because they're so short in supply cut off, and they're just not a predictable. They're probably one of the groups that's the hardest one to get, predict success out of. So, thoughts on defensive line?
So when I was talking earlier about how there's spots on the defense that I could see us this year getting into a position like we were in with cornerback last year, defensive line is a clear spot with that for me. If you just look at who you listed off before, let's say something, God forbid, happened to Daniels, and it not even a full year, but just half a year, a quarter, a third of the season. Even with Francois on the team, he doesn't know the team yet. We don't know how he's meshing in with it. That could very quickly become a bunch of guys who have good flashes, but then also young moments, and no one really there to solidify that. And obviously, like I said, you're not going to draft some veteran to come in with experience, and you got that with the signing from Washington. But I really think you need more bodies there, and you need solid, first, second round in that spot to help be set up. It needs it, because if we lost the defensive line and we still have weaknesses at quarterback, well, then we're gonna need that fourth tight end, because we're gonna need everyone on offense all the time.
Michelle?
So I feel like the Packers could probably get the most bang for their buck if they could find a defensive end who could both rush off the edge and also defend the run. Then that way, if we do feel that, and we haven't gotten there yet, and I don't mean to jump ahead, but if we do feel like outside linebacker is getting a little bit hairy, that kind of kills two birds with one stone. I know a lot of people really like Michigan's Taco Charlton for the Packers, but I think he's probably going to be better for a 4-3 defense rather than a 3-4. But I think there are definitely, it's one of the defensive line / edge rushers are one of the deepest positions in the draft this year, so I think they'll have no problem if they want to address it, in the first 3 rounds or so.
Yeah, I mean, the position you're talking about is really the elephant position, which is what they used Julius Peppers at before last year, where they actually played him inside a lot more because he just wasn't able to handle the outside as much. But yeah, I mean, that is a position where you can have multiple impact both against the run and with some pass rush help at the same time. So if you can get some help there, and you don't get a pure edge rusher, it's not the end of the world. But I don't know about drafting one that high. I don't see that happening this year. I think if they pick up a defensive end, it's probably going to be in the round 4 or 5 range. I just see too many other dire needs.
And once again, this goes back to the old philosophy that we use the draft to actually fill holes for the present season. And I just don't think the Packers have any choice anymore. We're not going to dip anymore into free agency. So, yeah, we do have to kind of look at the draft to fill those holes. I think the key for that defensive line, really, I think Francis obviously brings some veteran experience, but Kenny Clark, here's a guy who's a first-round draft pick, really was invisible most of the season. Comes in the last 2 games and makes a couple starts and he did okay, but everyone's really excited about that. And I do consider him kind of in that same category right now as maybe Randall and those cornerbacks who kind of had that sophomore slump. I think if Clark can really step in his sophomore season and take a step forward instead of a step back, it really does solidify if he can come in and play that interior line and really obviously free up Mike Daniels to cause a lot of havoc and Francis to cause a lot of havoc. If he can do that, I think that really solves a lot of problems. But I think a lot of it really rides on Kenny Clark's development at this point because they seem very high on that. I'll believe it when I see it. So would you guys agree defensive line, mid-round, early mid-round addressing there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Let's move on to a different positional group. Well, Julius Peppers is gone. Went back to Carolina, apparently doing his retirement tour down there. I don't know if he was particularly... he was still there. He was still productive, but I think clearly he wasn't the player that he was a few years prior. Still made some impact, but was not the force that he was maybe a few years ago. We have a lot of big names here. Maybe unlike defensive line, we have a lot of names on here that we've heard that have been kind of our hopes and dreams pinned on them over the years. Obviously, you have Clay Matthews. Hopefully he's healthy. We've got Fackrell. We've got Elliott. We got Martinez. We got Perry. Nick Perry resigned, former first rounder. We got Jake Ryan from 16 Candles. Thomas. So, 3-4 defense, you need a lot of players. You need a lot of bodies there to fill in those 4 linebacker positions. But obviously linebacker still comes in and is always a concern, especially now with Peppers gone, especially looking at the interior. Your thoughts on linebacker? Are we going to look at that somewhere in the draft, maybe mid-round, maybe even earlier rounds? Jersey Al, we're going to start with you.
Yay! I get to talk. Okay. For me, and I'm going to, instead of saying linebacker, I'm going to be more specific and just say edge rusher. That is number 1 priority. That's what I want to see with that first pick. There's going to be good value there, whether it's Charles Harris or TJ Watt or a couple of other guys. That's what I want to see with pick number 1. I think that's the pick that would have the biggest impact on the defense this year, and kind of what I'm all about here. I want to draft people that are going to have as much impact as they can now while our offense is still what it is and before there's any type of decline from Aaron Rodgers. So I'm going with edge rusher as being my number 1 priority, round 1 pick all the way.
Okay, so Jersey Al's agenda has been revealed.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at Jersey. Did you have someone in mind? I'm just kind of looking at the list of outside linebackers. Is there anyone that is really popping into your mind?
Yeah, the two names that I just mentioned, Charles Harris and T.J. Watt. I'd be thrilled with either one of them. Charles Harris is a guy with NFL-ready pass rush moves. He would come in and be able to help year 1, no doubt. T.J. Watt is a little bit more of a longer-term project. He might need a year or so, but he's got a lot more upside. So he'd be a better choice for the team overall. Harris more for immediate impact. I'd be happy with either one.
All right. Ladies, Jersey Al has now given his bid that our first-round pick should go to a linebacker edge rusher. Do you agree or disagree?
I would not be sad. There would be no throwing things if we drafted an edge rusher first round. And I definitely think that early in this draft it's a necessity, and I think it's also a chance for the Packers to regain a tilt-the-field defensive player. Just someone who really can change the game completely from a defensive standpoint. Not necessarily, game 1, their first, game rookie season, but I think we've got, like you said, we have a lot of people who are like, oh, this is going to be the guy and this is going to be the guy. But I really think actually investing in a good name at this position as opposed to here's somebody with a lot of upside and we're going to invest time in, and look at him have some bursts in preseason, would really shore up the defense, because that our middle and our ability to kind of have that elephant pass rusher mix of a playmaker who can just be all over it, it's not there right now.
Are you putting your money on T.J. Watt, Jayme?
I would be really excited with T.J. Watt. I'm not someone who sits and studies the draft class, so I couldn't tell you a thing about the other person at Al said. But really, if that's where we went in it, I would be happy with it.
All right, Michelle.
I think that objectively, cornerback is a much more worrisome position group to me. I think there's less studs on the roster there currently, and I think it's a bigger need. But that being the case, I think that there are difference-making corners who could work into that competition who will be available in rounds 2 or 3. And I think that after quarterback, edge rushers are probably the most important position on the field in today's NFL, because the quarterbacks are getting so athletic and so mobile and so crazy that you need people whose sole job it is just go after them. And I think especially with the Packers running their psycho and their NASCAR packages that just call for so many linebackers being on the field at one time, I think you can never go wrong in adding to that position. So I've been kind of waffling back and forth. I still think the Packers could maybe go with a corner like Ohio State's Garyon Conley in the first round, but gun to my head, if I had to pick someone, I think it could be T.J. Watt for sure. I think he just makes so much sense for that system. Like Al said, he's a little bit raw. He used to play on offense, and he only really has one season of starting experience, but in some ways I think that when you can get a guy who can contribute right away but can also become tailored to your scheme, that's kind of a win-win.
And I would agree. I think Watt's a pretty good, safe choice at 1, although he doesn't necessarily have to be there. But, I would agree. Corner and outside linebacker is probably where we're looking in that first round. So that's settled. Al gets his way for the most part. Nicely done. Let's head on back to secondary. So, you would think our safeties feel pretty set. You got Morgan Burnett and HaHa Clinton-Dix. Your opinion on either player, I think HaHa's kind of come into his own. Morgan Burnett still seems relatively stable back there at safety, but obviously our corners are an issue. Losing Micah Hyde, no matter how you slice it, no matter your opinion, he did a lot of roles for this team. So there is a loss, and there are some holes that are there without him. Sam Shields obviously didn't contribute last year. He's officially gone. We bring back Devon House, who gives us yet another body to put at cornerback who may or may not get burned by a talented receiver, is not fixing the problem that we've needed a playmaker. So it really kind of comes down to Randall and Rollins. Third-year players who've come in, and I'm just going to comment on it to start, because I had a really long talk with Matt Bowen for my Cheesehead TV draft article. And I only used a couple quotes from him, but we talked for almost 45 minutes, and he spent a lot of time talking about Randall and Rollins. Because, I was trying to needle him a little bit during the interview and said, is Ted Thompson, is his draft, stock dropping? Because look at these two corners who've got in. And he was slamming his fist. He said, those two guys are going to come around in year 3, and they're going to contribute. And, he was very adamant about it. And, of course, he's a former defensive back himself, so I think he's got some pretty good background on it. But, Matt Bowen, really a strong believer in those two guys. So how are you guys feeling about them? Are they going to develop? Even one of them developed. Does that put us in a position where it's a little more safe? Or are you guys really concerned about this? This has got to be a round 1, round 2 address.
Well, Matt, I would say they better contribute because they're the guys. They're the starters, right? I mean, you got Devon House in here now. Yeah, so they had better, particularly. Right. So I hope that the confidence that Matt has is well placed and that he's right, because there's really little other option right now. Devon House is going to help somewhat, But most of the time the Packers are playing with 3 cornerbacks on the field, so those 2 guys are going to be out there. Hope you're right, Matt.
Michelle.
I wish. Go ahead, Jayme. I'm still forming my thoughts.
I wish I had the confidence that Matt Bowen had, because you see flashes from Randall and Rollins, and then you just see the people who need to be benched while they're healthy in a playoff game. I mean, it's just getting burned, not watching the ball, just mistakes that you're just like, I don't understand how, especially from, Randall as high of a pick as he was, that you're just, I don't understand how you are so where you are. Yeah, they're going to have to step up, because even if we draft someone spectacular, we're drafting 1 cornerback. They're not going to solve all the cornerback problems. But there's no way that we can go out of round 3 without drafting a cornerback. I mean, clear last season. This is a position that Ted Thompson did not plan for. He did not foresee. He did not lay a lot of groundwork for it. And we were thin going into the season, and it just got thinner and worse as the season went on. We need more bodies. We need more people in there to have competition. So it's not just, last year was so bad. We need more help. And I wish I felt better about it. But I don't think our cornerback situation is going to improve next year, no matter who we draft.
It's such a catch-22, because the reason why I would be okay if the Packers don't take one in round 1 at 29 is that, theoretically, we've got 3 guys on the roster who should be able to start outside. We've got, Devon House, who at the very least will be the nickel corner, and we've got Rollins and Randall outside, or Rollins as the nickel and Devon outside. But at the same time, those 3 guys should be starters, and yet they don't look like starters. And so if you draft someone in round 1, you never want to draft someone in the first round and then have them only be a rotational player. So it seems like it might be a waste in that sense. But on the other hand, you just need someone to show up and be a starter. And I don't know, it's hard. I don't think that I would like it if, a first-round pick came in and wasn't getting on the field, when we could have had a great, pass-rushing edge rusher getting in there right away. But certainly I think at the very least they need quality depth, and they need someone to push these guys in training camp and just kind of make them, they cannot head into this season falling backwards into the starting roles and just feeling like they're there by default. They have to feel like they earned it. Or I don't think we're going to see a turnaround.
Well, and the difficult part is, of course, that Ted Thompson invested a first and a second round pick on these 2 guys 2 years ago. We shouldn't have to be coming back around to invest another high round draft pick at this position. So that really, you go back and, like I said, my conversation with Matt Bowen, that's the big thing. You really are, when you're drafting, you're supposed to be drafting 2-3 years in the future. That's really why you're making those drafts. So it is important that those guys develop, because if we have to do makeup work, if we have to do fix work because they don't develop, it's huge. So Jayme says we're not going to get out of round 3 without a corner. Jersey Al and Michelle, would you guys agree?
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to skip specialists because I don't think we need to, but let's just kind of review and see if you guys agree. I'm just going to go through quarterback, wide receiver. We're probably thinking mid to late round, if any at all. Tight end, probably thinking mid to late round, if at all. But we're looking possibly linebacker first round, corner second round, possibly offensive line, defensive line third round, running back maybe fourth, fifth round. Would you say, if you saw a draft that came through like that based on what we just discussed, would you be content with at least the positional addressings within the draft?
Thanks for stealing my Hot Pocket word for word.
I literally just watched Al type that and was like...
Right? Did he? Yeah. Oh, it's gone suddenly.
I'm not reading ahead in the script, guys. Come on. So I'll let Al address this. Hang on. Here's how we're going to do this. Because I just said what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the Hot Pocket. We're going to let Mr. Bracco answer this question now. So you ready? Here we go.
Hot Pocket.
Yeah. Okay, my hot pocket is, are you excited about this long snapper debate? No. Pocket. As CD just gave away, I've got the blueprint for Ted Thompson. I've had this blueprint in my head for months now. I've followed it pretty religiously in any mock draft that I worked up. First round, I think the value at that pick is going to be, at that point, is going to be edge rusher. Ted loves value. I love need. Perfect marriage. Ted picking edge rusher. Second round, I think the value is going to be at cornerback. I love need. Ted loves value. Pick the cornerback. Third round, same story. This time for guard. Fourth round, running back. I think it's set in stone. Do it. Whatever you do with your other picks, Ted, I don't care. That's my hot pocket.
Hot pocket.
All right. Michelle, your hot pocket.
All right. Well, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but my hot pocket is basically that because the Packers have a few glaring areas of weakness, they need to make sure to keep their strengths a strength. And what I mean specifically when I say that is edge rushers. You know, they re-signed Nick Perry, which was great. There was a minute there that I thought they were going to let him walk away, and I was really sweating. I know that some people have mixed feelings on him, but I think we can all agree that he proved himself when he needed to and earned that contract. But, you know, letting Dayton Jones walk away, I think, was a pretty big blow. And I think that Matthews, Perry, and Jaron Elliott have a lot on their shoulders. So I think that you never want to let something that was a huge strength approach the point of being a weakness. And so even though there might be other areas on the team where we see bigger holes, like at corner, like at guard, I think drafting that edge rusher in the first round makes sure that one of the best parts of your defense stays that way, and that you never have a situation again like you had against the Bears where no-name quarterbacks are just running all over you and just, you know, looking like Brett Favre out there. So I think you've got to, you know, rush the passer first and foremost, keep that strength a strength.
All right. And I'm guessing that was your?
Hot pocket.
There you go. Jayme.
Okay, well, you brought this up earlier about Martellus Bennett and his very unique personality and how it doesn't really kind of fit into the pigeonhole box of Packer people and this kind of quiet, reserved demeanor that Packers generally seem to go for. And I was really glad that when Michelle talked about his children's book writing, and actually I'll just call her my sister-in-law. She was a Patriots fan, and she has this sweatshirt, and has the character that Martellus Bennett drew for his daughter on it. Like, she's a big fan. She really kind of opened my eyes to him on that part of him, and it's so much of that part of him and his larger than life, and just his living himself and his truths unapologetically, and his love for the things that he loves and his disdain for the things that he disdains very vibrantly. And I became really enamored with it, and it just, not just because it's political, but just because it seems that part, you know, someone who is that intense really doesn't exist a lot in Green Bay. I think we've seen flashes of people like Mike Daniels, or even someone like Tom Crabtree, someone who's just quirky and really out there in their own sense and becomes fan favorites. But I think because Martellus Bennett can sometimes get political and bring up social issues, and because Green Bay is the town that it is, and I also just think our media and fan markets tend to not like what we call distractions off the field. I know there's a lot of the Rodgers talk this offseason. I actually saw a comment on one of Jason, and someone was saying, I'm going to care about Aaron Rodgers' private life as long as he's on my TV selling me insurance. And, like, the fact that selling insurance was an offensive, or just, like, that was the, like, you've stepped over this line into my space because you're selling insurance. So when I think of that, and Aaron Rodgers is kind of the typical, he doesn't speak out on things, he's very reserved. He's not even, like, even his quirkiness stuff is real subtle and low, like the Big Lebowski sweater and the grape soda. Like, it's, even all of that stuff is just very reserved. So even that kind of person who performs generally very well gets scrutinized. So I'm interested to see how the fans and the media react to having the personality that Bennett is in the locker room. And I think a lot will depend on his performance. And I'm excited to watch this unfold in the next season. I'm very happy he's here. I really like his personality, but I think it will be interesting to watch. So that is my Hot Pocket.
Hot Pocket.
And I got to agree with you, Jayme. I think there's that fear that we're seeing this whole Jermichael Finley thing come back, this big personality that may be a little controversial, but Finley seems so random. And Bennett seems to have, when Bennett does do things, it's very focused. He has a reason for what he's doing and what he's saying. Whether you agree with it or not, at least it's very focused. Yes, I would agree. Yeah. For my Hot Pocket, I'm just going to throw it out there. I know it's not necessarily related to the draft, but the Packers have agreed to sign former linebacker A.J. Hawk to a one-day contract so that he can retire as a Green Bay Packer this year. And I guess it does go back. Most of you guys know I don't overanalyze the draft. I did try to do that many years ago, and I always ended up being wrong. And it always bothered me because I'm like, no, I've read everything, and this is the guy we should draft. And then Ted Thompson would draft someone else because he says, well, you're no expert. Ted Thompson's the expert. So then why did I spend all this time studying it? But one of the times I really did get into it was obviously that 2006 draft when there was that real group of about 7 really first-tier players, of which A.J. Hawk was one. And I was a major proponent for A.J. Hawk. He was my boy. I really pushed for A.J. Hawk, not because after doing a lot of the analysis that I thought he necessarily had the highest ceiling of all the draft picks, DeBrickashaw, Ferguson, and all the other guys, the tight end for San Francisco. What was his name again?
Vernon Davis.
Oh, yeah. There were guys who had really, really high ceilings, but I always felt that A.J. Hawk had the highest basement. I looked at, from everything I researched with him, I did not think he was going to be a bust. And when you go back and you can have the memories of Tony Mandrich and how big of a deal that is to have a draft pick that high and not work out, it really can set your program back a couple years. So A.J. Hawk finishes his career with the Packers as the all-time leader in tackles, which is like the epitome of I'm a consistent player. And I'm on the field and I'm making tackles. He didn't lead in sacks, he didn't lead in interceptions, he didn't lead in maybe some of the more impactful ones, but he led in tackles. I really think A.J. Hawk took a lot of I'm not going to say abuse, but he took some criticism because he never seemed to live up to this top 5 pick status that he had. I think if A.J. Hawk was drafted in the 5th round and had the career that he had, we would be singing his praises as being such a great pick by Ted Thompson. But he wasn't. He was a top 5 pick, and therefore he always kind of had the shadow that he wasn't Mike Singletary. We kept expecting some year Mike Singletary to show up and just create havoc on the field. And instead, he just was this consistent player. He was the player that was wearing the defensive helmet, obviously with the calling plays. So, I don't know. I guess being a proponent for A.J. Hawk all those years and obviously having to kind of concede at the end of his career in Green Bay and say, yeah, you know what, he's kind of become Brady Papinga a little bit, and it's time for him possibly to move on and see if we can get what's better. He did have a great career, and I was proud to have a Hawk jersey for years. In fact, everyone in my family had a Hawk jersey at one point. We had family pictures taken with every one of us in Hawk jerseys. Don't ask me why. They were just readily available. But, congratulations to A.J. Hawk on a great career, and we're very happy that he is retiring as a Green Bay Packer. It's well-deserved. He's a good player and a good guy. And that is my
Hot Pocket.
All right. So, since we're down to about 60 seconds, I think it's time for us to
Well, thank you
all
so much for joining us tonight on Cheesehead Radio and our draft special. Make sure to head on over to PackersTalk.com where you can explore several unique Packers podcasts. Please follow @PackersTalkNet on Twitter and like the Packers Talk page on Facebook. Cheesehead Radio and all of our Packers Talk podcasts are available on iTunes. Just Google Packers Talk iTunes and you'll find it. Be sure to subscribe and please leave us a review, a positive one, if you can. You can also listen in by using Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, or your favorite podcast app and search for Packers Talk. Finally, please be sure to support our sponsor, Ticket King. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com. That's theticketking.com. that's a wrap, and I'll be done trying to stream over music. Go Pack Go.
Time to party.
We have never expired our time, ever, in a long time. I guess that's what happens when we expire our time. So, anyway, thanks for joining us on this train wreck of a draft special, and we look forward to talking to you after the draft. Go Pack Go.
Cue the Hindenburg audio clip.
Night, guys.
Good night.
Night, all.
Good night.
Hey, let's go watch Brett Hundley's commercial now. Don't forget.
Yep, can't miss that.